here and this opportunity to present, I hope, some interesting findings. So just a second, I will share my screen. Here it is. So let's start. So yeah, today we will discuss key factors and drivers. Thank you for introduction. So I can skip my first slide where I'm describing my expertise in studying migration. That's interesting, but I would like to stress one project which we conducted under guidance of Reverend Boris Gudzyak, and that was very, very nice. We had a project of studying Ukrainian migrants in France, in Poland, and in USA, and that was all before COVID pandemic started. So we were lucky to finish the third part of that research right few months before the global pandemic started. So we published 2 books on that project. Also, I was participant of Euronet project. That's project united 12 countries, 12 universities all over Eurasia, 6 from Europe, 6 from Asia, to study migration flows between Europe and Asia in 2014-2017. And also now I'm conducting some research on Ukrainian migrants or refugees in Czech Republic and Ireland. Okay, so let's go to our topic. And Father Roman, could you help me? I have 30 minutes for lecture, yes, or more?
40 or 45 minutes,
Okay.
and it was a half of our discussion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start with key terms. Should we say factors, drivers, or as 2 Austrian scholars, Chaika and Reinprecht, discussed 2 other terms like causes or determinants? So what term should we use in our studies? And that's important, and that topic was raised in Professor Kozlova lecture, and also I heard questions from audience. So, and Father Roman mentioned this aspect. So we should remember that migration process is result of decision making by migrants. So that's part of their agency. So that's not like some natural process that some causes force people to move. That's result of their thinking and deciding to move or to stay. So that's why Chaika and Reinprecht, they say that factor is most general term, but it's too general. It's sometimes umbrella term. It unites different aspects, different causes or determinants. So they say we can use determinants as a term. That's nice term, but it describes only structural factors like economics, like political situation, maybe climate change. That's also important. But this concept ignores human agency. So it ignores that people are the key part of this migration process, that people decide whether they should leave or stay in their country. Or maybe if we are talking about internal migration inside one country, whether they are going to leave their town, city, village and move to other region of country or no. So another word is causes, and that's also a nice word, and it describes some conditions that induce migration. But again, when causes are used in articles, very often, it means that authors study only one cause. So it implies that we have one single, maybe fundamental reason for migration. It's not okay also because migration has a lot of reasons, a lot of causes. So that's why Chaika and Reinprecht say that drivers are best concept for describing factors that induce migration, because as you can see from their definition, drivers are structural elements enabling or constraining the exercise of agency by social actors. So drivers are parts of situation that maybe help people, they facilitate people's desire to move, or maybe they constrain them from moving to other region or other country. And that's important. So that's why we will talk about factors and drivers, because factors is broader term. And I will go now to general model of migration process. So we heard a lot of migration theories, but now I would like to introduce you and to ask you to think about migration from perspective of single individual. So not like a process, social process that involves thousands or millions of people, but let's have a look at a migration process from perspective of single individual, why he or she decides to move. So that model was I found in report, which I will share after my lecture, that International Organization of Migration, their latest report published in 2024, migration situation in the world. So they stress on these models that we should remember that migration process consists of three main components. So there are some structural causes. There are some. Oh, can you see my screen? Oh no.
No, it's disappeared.
Okay, that's strange. Thank you. Okay, just a second. Okay, so we have some. Okay, I hope you can see it now. Yeah, great, thank you. So we can so three components: structural conditions, migrants agency, and infrastructure. So there are some conditions which are called conditions and prospects. We will later go we will discuss them more thoroughly. That maybe that can be called also preconditions that create situation when people start thinking about migration. But also we have so-called migrants agency, and here in this model you can see this agency is like life aspirations, also desire to change something, and migrant aspirations. So we can have some life aspirations when migrants think about their future life and they decide, are they going to have decent life in this country, in this region, or maybe no. Then these life aspirations combined with conditions where people live, they can cause they can cause desire to change. They can cause this desire to change, and sometimes this desire to change will result in migration aspirations. So people decide they really want to migrate to other country, to other region, or maybe this desire for change will result in other responses. So this desire for change, even if it's combined with life aspirations, with some migrational preconditions, it doesn't necessarily lead to a decision that people want to migrate. Maybe no, maybe they will change something in their life, for example, change profession or change, I don't know, their family status. It also can be some strategy. So why that's important? Because also we have migration infrastructure. So that's elements of situation which also help or maybe not do not help people to migrate, like, I don't know, visa restrictions, or maybe some transport connections between countries, or something like that. So that's why we need to remember that migration process is not simple one-time decision. It involves a lot of little decisions made through maybe a long period of time. So the quote from this report, I like it very much. It says, desire for change does not necessarily result in desire to migrate, and desire to migrate does not necessarily result in migration. And we need to remember this. So even if people have some migration aspirations, but there is no infrastructure to leave their country or to leave their region, for example, sorry, I forgot who asked this very nice question about Ukrainians who live under Russian occupation and why didn't they leave their region. So that's a problem. For example, as Professor Kozlova mentioned, people have dwelling there and they do not have enough money to buy new dwellings in new regions of Ukraine. So that's part of this migration infrastructure. There is no support from other from authorities, from local authorities, from national authorities, to buy a new house. That's why people may say, okay, I will stay here. It's not very nice to live under occupation, but here we have our own house, so we have place to live, to stay, and that's why we are not going to leave our region. So here's the same problem with transport connections. As Father Roman mentions, that we had till 2022, there was opportunity to travel from to occupied territories of Ukraine via this so-called borders, and that was possible. But now it's impossible. So that's also part of this migration infrastructure. So people who live now since 2022 under occupation, they want to live, but sometimes they don't have this infrastructure to live. They need to go to Russia sometimes, and I know these people, some of these people, they need to go to Russia to go to some European countries to return to Ukraine. That takes a lot of efforts, a lot of money. So that's also part of this migration infrastructure. So this infrastructure also influences how people decide whether they will migrate, and that's migrate outcome, or whether they will stay. So maybe we may have failed migration attempts, or maybe we may have involuntary immobility. So people want to leave, but they don't have opportunity. So that's why they stay in the country. Okay, so we plan to discuss drivers of migration, and we started with the general model. But I guess it's very useful. So we need to remember that this is a long process which involves a lot of factors. So what are these factors? Again, we can group these drivers into three major levels. Like we have macro level, meso level, and micro level. So micro level is situated on a nation state or regional level. So that's inequalities between different regions, between different places. Meso level is connected to some group characteristics, for example, networks of individuals or some roles, norms, expectations, and we will discuss it later. And micro level is connected to individuals, so their personal aspirations, perceptions, characteristics. And we should remember that all these types of drivers, they can be divided also into slow changing and rapid changing. So some of them are slow changing, and sometimes there are disparities between different regions or countries. For example, wages in Ukraine are lower than wages in Poland. So they change slowly over the time. Or we may have some climate changes that are also slow changing. Like in Ukraine, the last, I don't know, 5 winters, we have less snow than usual, and that's why that influences our agriculture. So that also may influence people. They are slow changing. And also we have some specific events, so-called rapid changing drivers. And that's, of course, war, for example, or any other disaster. And they can also interfere. They can interact between each other. That's why the best situation for us is describe drivers as a complex environment of drivers. So there is no one single driver that influences humans' behavior. We have a lot of drivers, and they influence behavior of our possible or future migrants, potential migrants, and we should take that into account. Okay, so let's go to next slide again about general models. So to summarize what we've already discussed, migration is a context-dependent result of individual decision framed by collective actions. Why it's important to remember that migration is, again, this context-dependent result of individual decision framed by collective action. So those are individuals who decide to migrate, but their decision depends on groups that they are belonging to. For example, we will discuss, for example, how family relations influence migration aspirations. So does these family relations facilitate migration or maybe constrain? Also, these decisions are made, and that's the most important part of this definition, they are made in a certain context. And this context may facilitate or may constrain individuals' decision to migrate. So remember all this stuff. Let's go to our set of drivers. Okay, also about general model, but that's about drivers. So we have so-called, that's why I used word factors. We can have some predisposing factors that are some societal structures that influence decisions to migrate. For example, structural disparities between different regions, countries, social stratas. And these factors are mediated by migration drivers. So these drivers, they also they influence our behavior in combination with these predisposing factors. And there are 4 important characteristics of these drivers. Proximity or immediacy of this driver. Does it influence our life immediately, or it have some long-term effect or delayed effect? Temporality. Are they permanent or they will disappear after some time? For example, when we discuss war, we understand in Ukraine that war lasts since for some regions since 2014, for most of Ukrainian society since 2022. So it lasts for 3 years, and people understand that it will not end in this year. Maybe it will end next year, but they are not sure. So that's temporality. As I understand that war is the factor, is the driver that will last at least for 2, 3, 4 years more. Some drivers may last for 1 month, for example, when we describe some, I don't know, climate, some natural, I don't know, disasters like heavy rains or something like that. Selectivity. So we should remember that some drivers influence some social groups more intense than others. For example, problems with agriculture, what I mentioned, lower level of precipitation in Ukraine due to climate changes may affect agriculture, so that will affect Ukrainian farmers, but will less affect, for example, Ukrainian IT sector. So we should remember that different drivers affect different social groups in a different way. And geography, again, different drivers may affect different regions of country or different parts of the world in a different way. Again, if we are going back to Ukraine, different regions of Ukraine suffer from war in a different way. For example, Kiev suffers Russian rocket and drone attacks almost each night, or Kharkiv suffers from even shellings, bomb shellings each night. Lviv or Uzhhorod, which are in the western part of Ukraine, they suffer such Russian attacks more rare, and they are more rare for these parts of Ukraine. So again, that's part of these drivers, geography, and these drivers interfere or interact between themselves. So now we can go to our drivers, and I will start with a question. As I warned you, I will ask some questions to you. So you can see that's data from this report by International Organization of Migration from 2024. And they presented dynamics from 2000 till 2020, and they breakdown of migrants by sex. And you can see that female migrants prevail, but I guess you can see that in 2000 females, oh sorry, males, males. Yes, that's my mistake. So males were almost 51% of migrants in 2000, but they are 52% of migrants in 2020. So why this share changed? And also on this axis you can see number of migrants. So number of migrants increased during this past 20 years from approximately 80 million of male and female migrants to 140 migrants, male migrants, and 130, something like that, female. So how can we interpret these different shares of male and females in immigration? How we can explain this? And is this universal tendency that males are mostly migrants in all cases, or no? What do you think? Yes, I know that's a risky one, because I'm asking you a question, and maybe you want to save your answers till the end of our lecture. So if you have any guesses, please tell me or write in the chat if it's okay for you. If no, I will just proceed. It's no problem. So males are more so statistically analyzing, males are more probably migrants in contemporary world. So 52%. But is this tendency universal? Okay, I will give you an answer. No, it depends on types of migration. Oh yeah, someone wanted to answer, please.
No, I just said because males are often the provider for families.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's
leaders, decision makers.
That's a great.
Maybe the male person is, because of they're strong, they're prepared to take a risk.
Yes, thank you. Great. Yes, great answer.
Hunters.
Yes, breadwinners. I like this word very much. Yeah. So often males are sent by families to go abroad to work, and in, for example, in migration crisis in 2015, I guess, we had a situation when Europe was flooded with male migrants from Syria, and that was not because they moved from Syria because they feared war, but because their family sent them to Europe to find a job, to get some place to live, and after that their families, females and children, joined them. So the first wave of migrants were mostly males, but after 1 year it appeared that a lot of also females joined them. So yeah, thank you. I'm not sure what's your name,
Francis.
Francis, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
If you take a look, if you take a look at here it is, on statistic of forcibly displaced people, so people who fled from war or another disasters, you can see that males and females are in almost exact proportions, and even females prevail. Why? Because they fly from disasters. That's why males stay here. They try to put their family safe. And also you can see here very interesting results. So in gray you can see that's a proportion, a share of people in all world population, and here you can see numbers or shares or proportions of that certain age groups among forcibly displaced people. And you can see, for example, that children female children are 13% of all world population, but among forcibly displaced people they are 19%. Why? Because families try to secure their children. That's why they are applying for this refugee status. They are leaving their countries or regions. So that's why among forcibly displaced people we have a lot of children, and their share is much more higher than in general population. So in that report is mentioned that only 29% of world population are children, but 39% of them are among forcibly displaced people. Why? Because their families try to secure them. And also we can see a lot of people from other age groups. So that's important. We should remember that different statistical data, it may represent the general picture, but we should go into details, into certain types of migrations or even directions of migration. So I hope you remember that two important concepts: country of origin and destination country. So we should remember to what country are heading our migrants and why they're heading there, because there are also some certain characteristics which explain why we have differences between that. Okay, let's go further, and that's again taxonomy of migration drivers designed by those Austrian scholars, which I liked very much, Matthias Chaika and Konstantin Reinprecht. So they provided 24 drivers, and here are all they listed. I'm not sure we will go through all of them, but I will provide. So which is important here, and which I like very much here, they provided also links to portal of migration data, and that portal also provides a short 1-2 paragraphs explanation of which of this driver means. For example, population dynamics, that lack of workforce in some regions, and maybe even looking for some spouses. For example, lack of youth, young population in villages. Sorry, force people to go to other regions, other countries. Okay, so I will not go through all of this, but they provided 9 dimensions. So why I like this taxonomy? Because Chaika and Reinprecht, they analyzed 300 empirical studies, and they found out that in studies, in most cases, only 2 drivers are analyzed. So when you have one study on migration, it mostly focuses on 1, maybe 2 drivers. And they try to combine to create this taxonomy to explain what different types of drivers we can see. So they are demographic, economic, and environmental, human development, individual, political, institutional, security, social, cultural, and supranational. We will discuss these drivers in a little bit different way, but again, I will send you a link to that portal where you can read all that descriptions of all the drivers and recent studies on them. But we will go through them in a little bit different way. So we will go into, we will divide them into three. Okay, I can, here it is. I'm looking for that information. On the three levels: individual specific drivers, group specific drivers, and macro structural drivers. So we will discuss them in a such way. But before we go there, I will start with a question. Not a question, sorry, with example, with security. So in that taxonomy, we can see that security often is a driver for migration. Like, people do not feel secure in their own country, and they list, for example, conflict, war, violence, or political situation and repression. And for example, people from Belarus may say, yeah, we know this because we have repressions under Lukashenko regime since 1994. So we have a number of Belarusians who are living abroad for 20, maybe more years. So they know this part. But what is important here, security is not driver, and I will go to the next slide. Security is not migration driver limited to situation in a country of origin or even in destination country. Sometimes security is a question on if country where migrants are heading. For example, migrants from Ukraine are trying to travel to another country, to the US. Will they feel there safe? I don't know. Before Trump administration, maybe, but after Trump decided to start so-called witch hunt for irregular migrants, they may not feel secure. They will feel that their, visas will be considered not valid, something like that. So they will be deported back to Ukraine, or maybe you know the story about US citizen who was deported to El Salvador because he was considered to be non-US citizen. It appears that he was US citizen, but because of migration services mistake, he was deported to another country. So security is part of situation in country of origin, but also part of situation in a destination country. And often this insecurity in destination country is associated with right-wing populism. That, for example, some political forces are rising in power, and they do not like migrants in their own country, and that endangers existing migrants and future possible migrants in that country. But also, security is important in this process as a part of decision making. Why? Because security, real or perceived, that's important, perceived. Maybe people feel that this transition to another country is not secure. In fact, it's secure, but they fear it's not secure, may influence the security, real or perceived, transition process, or even entry to destination country. And here, that's also a very nice diagram from international migration studies that security appears on 5 stages of migration process. So on decision to migrate, in transition, like from one country to another, in entry, for example, whether border security, border guards are hostile to migrants or no. Also, security influences decision to stay in that country and to return back. Okay, so if we don't have much time, so you will have this presentation, you can examine this diagram later, but that's important. So we should remember that in that taxonomy that Chaika and Reinprecht provided, we should remember that these parts, these drivers, should be associated not only with destination country or country of origin, but also with migration process as it is, with decision to go to another country and the situational factors that influence people during that decision. Okay, so let's go to these factors. I guess I have, some 10 minutes, something like that. So we will start with individual specific drivers, and that's important. Why? As you can recall from your previous lecture on theories of migration, mostly theories focus on some macro aspects, like economic problems, economic disparities, something like that. But also on networks, and that's meso level. But individual specific drivers are often omitted or decided to be not very important, but we should remember them. So what are these individual specific drivers? Material and non-material, personal, but sometimes also household resources, and that's financial assets and property, as we discussed earlier. Problem with people on occupied territories who have their property and they don't have property in other regions, and they don't have enough money to buy new property, so that's why they decide to stay. Migration experience, it may foster or maybe constrain people from migration, aspirations. So that's a desire for better life, or sometimes it's fulfillment of individual or collective needs. For example, as sorry, I forgot. Francis? Okay. Yeah, mentioned. So we have okay. Sorry for this inconvenience. I just wanted to be sure that I corrected that I pronounced your name correctly. So in some countries, people go abroad because they are breadwinners, so need to provide some money for education of their children. And we know the situation, for example, in migration between Latin American countries and the United States. And we have a lot of remittances from the United States to these countries because this money are used to give proper education people in their countries, etc. So people are not looking for better life, but they feel a need to fulfill some collective needs, for example, needs for their family. And we should remember that these aspirations can change over time during migration. For example, when people migrate, they see that their life in country of origin is not, it lacks some quality, but then they go to another country looking for this this better life, and they see that level of life in that country is much more higher than they expected. So they fear that they will lack this quality of life again. So that's why their aspirations change. They think that, okay, I moved to this country, to the US, but I need to get a better job. Also, these aspirations, they depend on social imaginations, or what Arjun Appadurai mentioned in 2004, capacity to aspire. And Appadurai mentioned that very important thing, that television and internet influences our capacity to aspire. Due to mass media communication, or even movies or TV series, people can see or imagine that they see a real level of life in countries, in destination countries. That's why they imagine that life, for example, in the United States is very, very nice, very pleasant. And that's why they imagine that their life, they compare their life in country of origin to that imagined life in another country. And they say, okay, my life is not good here, I want to go to another country. And that's also part of this individual specific drivers, so this capacity to aspire. Also, attitudes, views, and perceptions about their own country, whether they feel proud to be part of that country or they are ashamed. That's why they want to leave their country to move to another. And even some psychological characteristics. So these are open-mindedness and even so-called adventurous personalities. So those people who are, they can more easily risk, they will more likely migrate to another country. Those who do not like to risk, they maybe will stay in country. Again, that's when we just omit another drivers that may influence this decision. So even such psychological characteristics can influence decision to migrate. Okay, and here is part which is related to that, and that's third example. That's geographical distribution of migrant workers by sex. So as you can see, as we remember, males, they dominate among migrants, 52%, but you can see that in certain regions, like in Northern America and North and Southern and Western Europe, females consist almost half or even more than half of all migrants. In other regions like Arab states, males dominate. So how can we explain these differences? Why females dominate in migration to Northern America or Western Europe, and why males, for example, dominate in migration to Arab states? Do you have any guesses?
Well, I'm thinking of the Arab states that are the women like suppressed. I mean, patriarchy, the male is sort of the dominant person, so the females kind of tend to stay at home. And the males,
by the way, I didn't think about that, but yeah, that makes sense. By the way, yeah, we will also return to this later. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I heard someone else wanted to add something, or I was wrong.
Yes, I just wanted to say, okay, it's connected with what my previous colleague has just said, that of course it's patriarchy, and also most of the works is domestic, because usually okay, it's not a perception, but I know that from the Arab world that women are supposed to be at home, and these are places that people are seeking employment, especially domestic workers, which is about which can always be done by women.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that depends also on this labor market. And in Northern America, for example, a lot of jobs are in services. So it's okay to go there for women, but as we mentioned, also these gender norms or stereotypes are influencing behavior in for migrants who are heading to Arab states. But also you can see in some countries they also dominating because, for example, there is there is demand for workforce in construction. For example, we had that flow in between Ukraine and Russia prior to 2014. A lot of Ukrainian males moved to Russia to work at construction, and that's also part of that process. So we should remember that, and that's why we have differences in male-female migration to different regions. Okay, see someone wrote something in chat. Yes, cultural factors. Yes, thank you. So that's important. And let's go to group-specific drivers. So that's we already discussed. We can see here gender roles and norms. So different norms may influence not only in destination country, but also in country of origin. For example, migration for males is seen as okay, normal, maybe prestigious. For females is seen as not okay. Females should stay at home, etc. And that's also may influence in process of migration process. Also, we can see that household structure may influence migration. For example, if there are children or elderly members who require some care, that increases male migration and decreases female migration. But if elderly members do not require care, it increases female migration. Why? Because females see that they can now find their place in this labor market. They can find some job. And the more important, if we have dual, so-called dual breadwinning households, for that household where both spouses are working, this dual breadwinning decreases the likelihood of migration. Why? Because both partners, both spouses are working. That's why they're not going to migrate. But if one of them is unemployed, that's why they may decide to leave, to go to another country, to migrate. Okay. Also, we can see migrant networks or transnational communities. They provide some information. That's why they facilitate migration. But sometimes these migrant networks, they cause situation when migrants compete for resources. And in such cases, migrant networks, they constrain migration. And that's a problem. Also, migrants may be as a role models. For example, people who went abroad, earned good money for country of origin, returned back and built, I don't know, a nice house. And people say, wow, that's nice. I should do the same. And that's also part of these group-specific drivers. Okay, I see I have 1 minute. So let's go ahead to another factor. So here you can see gender. That's again, very nice diagram from International Organization of Migration studies on the gender dimensions throughout the migration cycle. I will not focus on that. We already discussed this. Also, that's a nice study on networks and migration. It was conducted in 2022 by number of, I didn't provide here, okay, I will send you an article, so I didn't provide here a reference. That's analysis of so-called old diasporas and new diasporas. So all diasporas are people who, for example, traveled abroad here in this study 10 years ago, and new diasporas, people who traveled abroad like several years ago. And it appears that new diasporas, they attract more migrants than old diasporas. So when we have diaspora of people living abroad for 10 or more years, these diasporas attract less migrants, these new diasporas. And okay, I would like to ask a question. Why does this happen? But we don't have enough time. So here is an answer. Old diasporas have fewer social contacts with country of origins. That's why they can't contact more effectively with potential migrants, and they can show them, you can go here to this country, you can find here a nice job, we will help you, because they almost lost contacts with their own country. And that's why all diasporas do not attract such big number of new migrants. Okay, here's another study in Rwanda in 2000, I forgot, 19 or something like that. They analyzed phone calls between different citizens of Rwanda. They studied internal migration, and it appeared, here is the main conclusion, that each additional contact in destination region is associated with increase in likelihood of migration. So if you have some people whom you know in a new region where you are heading to, like new country or new region of country, and if you have contact with these people, this increases your capacity and your desire to leave your own region to go to another region. Again, this study is has a lot of restrictions because it's based on analysis of phone calls, etc. But that's important. Okay, again, I will send this article to you later. And macro-specific drivers. But we almost discussed them when we had lecture on theories. So economic differences between regions, also in wages, but also in living conditions. And that's very important, that perception is very important. So migrants in general value losses more than equivalent gains. For example, when migrants calculate, I will lose something in my country of origin, for example, I will lose my job, I will not able be to use my apartment. It's seen as more valuable, these values, these goods in country of origin than gained values in new country. So that's important. That's why people mostly stay in their country of origin. They do not go to another countries because they value losses more than equivalent gains. So losses are more important for them than the new gains. Again, also highly skilled migrants are they respond more strongly to wage differentials than less skilled. That's why often we have migration of high skilled workers. We have problem of absolute deprivation. So if people are poor, so poverty is a constraint. If they are poor, they lack resources to travel to another country. Relative deprivation has ambiguous relations. Sometimes it fosters migration, sometimes it constrains. So we should remember that economic factors are secondary when we are talking about asylum seekers or this forcibly displaced people. Okay, so that's macro specific, and we don't have enough time to discuss this nice statistics, but doesn't matter, I hope. It just shows tendency.
Yes, we have 5 more minutes.
Okay, so that's very interesting trend, so-called mobility transition, from, you can see, from 60s till 2000, and you can see that. So on x-axis you can see GDP per capita in countries. So here we have poor countries, here we have rich countries, and it appears that in poor countries in 60s this low level of economic development really facilitates migration to another countries. But in 2000 we can see that no, level of migration in this country is much lower than in let's say middle developed countries. Again, in very rich countries we again have very low level of migration, and that's very interesting. So people migrate. In 60s they migrated from underdeveloped countries. Now they migrate from countries which are considered to be developed, and that's important. But people from underdeveloped countries are less likely to migrate because they lack some resources, and that's important part of that study. Okay, so let's we almost finished with all these drivers. So let's go to another one. Okay, we'll skip. That's also interesting diagram showing that you can see author divided all countries in 4 groups according to Human Development Index, and he analyzed tendency again in migration since 1995 till 2020. And it appears, as you can see, that in most countries people migrate from highly developed countries to highly developed countries, or from high HDI to very high HDI, as you can see from these graphs. Okay, we don't have enough time to discuss this, but as you can see from this blue part, these countries with very high HDI or high HDI. So you can see that mostly now, since 2020, mostly people migrate from well-developed countries to better developed countries. But when we discuss migration from low developed countries or underdeveloped countries, that's a problem. They do not migrate. Why? Or their share of their migration lacks, it decreases. Why? As we mentioned, because poverty is a constraint. It doesn't allow people to migrate. They lack some resources. For example, they can't buy a ticket to the plane, or they can't apply for visa, or migration rules are more strict for newcomers, etc. Okay. Also, I will not discuss this in details, but we have public policies like welfare state, public infrastructure, educational infrastructure, healthcare system, which also may force people to leave their own country, and also migration policies and human rights. So sometimes people migrate because of problems with human rights in their own country, but they do not migrate for other countries because their level of human rights or migration policies are too strict. Okay, so conflict and security, again, safety and that's very important. So that's I would like to stress, safety and security concerns might initially decrease migration. So people in insecure conditions may decide not to leave but to stay. Why? Because insecurity level forces them to stay in the country. Why? Because they fear that if when they leave their property it will be destroyed, or they will not find a new good job in a new region, new country. So migration starts if insecurity level exceeds some threshold. So if it exceeds some level that they expected as a normal, okay, that's why they start to migrate. And that's worked very well when we try to understand migration from Syria in 2014-15. So they had a civil war for a long time, but only after violence exceeded some level and Assad started using chemical weapons against its own population, people decide, okay, it's time to leave. So it's important to remember that insecurity is not automatical reason to leave. It might decrease migration. People fear to leave. They fear that something will happen with them during their travel. Again, as we discussed, security during transition. And also, there are three types of this insecurity that individuals are directly affected. They fear that maybe they can be affected in future, or there is general insecurity caused by political situation. It does not affect people, but they fear that if the whole level of insecurity is higher in the whole country, although they are not affected by it, they decide, okay, we should leave. As we mentioned, right-wing populism as a factor also of security, but in a country, destination country. When we discuss, and that's almost final, yes, final slide, I will not discuss this, okay, diagram. It just, you will examine it later, but it shows that directions between environmental changes and migration are very complex. So in we can see that these changes in environment, they affect some ecosystem services, and that creates some drivers for migration. But we should remember that some slow onset climate changes, I skipped here some word. They are not influencing migration, but economic factors. They are more directly influencing. Why? Because climate is important, but first it influences economics, and that's why people decided to leave their own country. So environmental degradation affects most financially constrained groups of people, and they are less mobile, and that's also a problem. Also, disasters trigger migration, we already know it, and international connections and relations, that's very important. They also influence migration. Why? Because cultural factors, they explain migration between developed countries. As we mentioned, we have a very high level of migration between developed countries, and often it's caused by cultural proximities or similarities. So people are more willingly to migrate to country to culture which is more familiar to them than to a known country. But also distance, and very interesting, is a skill selection factor. So migration to neighboring countries may involve low-skilled workers. But if we are discussing migration to far countries like from Ukraine to the US, it will involve more high-skilled workers. Why? Because they feel enough to secure to find a new job in a new country. If they are low-skilled workers, they may fear that they will not find enough or decent work in a new country, or we will stay on the same position in a new country, maybe even with lower wages, and that's a challenge. So long distance migration involves highly skilled workers. Okay, so that's okay. I took too much time. Okay, but that's it. So thank you for your attention. I guess you will have a lot of questions. So I'm looking forward for a question. I hope I can answer them.
Mhm.